Permiso, Néstor, tu micrófono está bloqueado.
Perdón. Todo este tiempo hablando, tenía el micrófono apagado. Bueno, buenos días. Muchas gracias a todos por sintonizarnos. Están aquí conectándose unas cuantas personas todavía por YouTube y vamos a esperar que se integren unas cuantas más. Pero ya estamos en vivo. Hoy jueves 27 de mayo estamos muy orgullosos y felices de poder contar con la presencia del arquitecto Wael Alaguar, que estará acompañándonos en este webinar muy esperado durante todo el semestre. Nos estará acompañando y contándonos un poco sobre su visión de diseño, su visión de la arquitectura y cómo ha sido su experiencia y su práctica profesional, que de manera que nos pueda a nosotros, de este lado del océano, poder iluminarnos un poquito más y orientarnos en cuanto a su práctica profesional en un entorno completamente distinto al nuestro y con otras constricciones y elementos que componen la práctica profesional en otro entorno. Cualquier duda que tengan, cualquier comentario, pregunta, pueden hacerla a través del canal de YouTube, a través de la caja de comentarios, y estaremos monitoreando sus preguntas para al final de la sesión poder darle seguimiento y darle respuesta a las mismas. Por motivos obviamente del lenguaje, vamos a estar conduciendo esta presentación en inglés, que es el idioma que va a estar utilizando nuestro orador, pero cualquier pregunta que tengan libremente en español o en inglés pueden hacerla a través de los comentarios. Wael, thank you very much for joining us. I'm gonna have to, give you a virtual round of applause because we have been expecting this conversation with you for such a long time now. And it is a pleasure and an honor to have you here, especially because we know that you have been taking time from your professional practice, and especially because in Dubai, it's nighttime right now. So we appreciate that. And we thank you for joining us. So welcome today. How are you feeling?
Great. Thank you, Nestor. It's really a pleasure to be with you today and presenting to you and fellow colleagues and students. I always find it lovely to share the work with others, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay, so while before we begin, I'm going to read a short biography just so that all of our audience can know a little bit more about you. And I'm going to take the liberty to read it in Spanish. Para todos los que se están uniendo ahora, voy a leer un poco una pequeña biografía sobre Wael Alaguar para que podamos conocer un poquito más sobre quién es nuestro invitado especial de hoy. Wael Alaguar fundó YY en 2009, es el nombre de su firma de arquitectura y diseño, como arquitecto principal, después de regresar al Medio Oriente desde Tokio. Con interés en los fenómenos naturales, el paisaje y los diagramas de relaciones sin forma, Wael tiene un enfoque multidisciplinario con el diseño y siempre busca desafiar los procesos convencionales para ampliar los límites del diseño. Sus proyectos ponen su sensibilidad de diseño individual en una arquitectura de luz natural, tiempo, estructura y paisaje. Al alinearse con los fenómenos naturales, Wael busca crear una arquitectura que sea mucho más que una fabricación hecha por el hombre, sino un cambio que permanece abierto a la adaptación y a la apropiación. Los espacios que emergen de su enfoque son provocaciones específicas del sitio que fomentan experiencias, actividades y comportamientos inesperados. Wael Alaguar es actualmente co-curador del Pabellón Nacional de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos para la Bienal de Venecia 2020 y 2021. Con ustedes les presento al arquitecto Wael Alaguar. Wael, it is now your time. You have open mic for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I will jump straight into the presentation. Basically, I will start with a brief introduction of some of my works, and then I will share with you the research regarding the National Pavilion of the UAE, which is currently on display in Venice. First of all, I'd like to explain the name of our company, YY. YY is a Japanese word. It's an onomatopoeia, and it means the sound of a cheering crowd. So automatically it tells you where our interest lies is usually in phenomena, being light, sound, things that are not only tangible or physical, things that architects are usually compelled or drawn to. I like to share this a slide of my lifestyle pre-COVID, and this is a photo of 1 year of boarding passes. So the travel was extremely crazy and extensive, traveling and jumping from project to project or meeting to meeting. And then to COVID, things have changed. Like I am today here with you presenting in a Zoom format or an online platform format, actually. While previously I would not find comfort, I still do not, honestly. I find it very strange speaking into a computer rather than engaging face-to-face with people and sharing, expressions also, which makes it much more interesting and captivating. So briefly, I'll explain the principles that drive my design approach. There are 6 main principles that I consider in every project. First is cultural and contextual sensitivities. I believe this is something that is key to every project. Second is interest in phenomena, being natural light, activity, wind, and time, especially time, is also very important. And third is the synthesis between architecture and landscape and art, which is also another component that I believe is important, and they should work together to generate architecture and space. And fourth is the architecture beyond functionality and program, which is the folly. Thinking of architecture just for providing basic functions and programs, I believe, misses a huge other point or part of architecture that should be always considered by the architect. And fifth is that I'm interested in diagram of relations and not diagram of form, very specifically meaning that architecture is not driven by form, but rather different relations that generate the form itself. And finally is the vernacular future, and this is the research work that I've been doing for the National Pavilion of the UAE. Actually, I was doing this research before the National Pavilion of the UAE, and it was an open call competition that I submitted for the competition, and we won the competition entry and to present the research in Venice currently, but the research continues beyond Venice, and I will be sharing this research with you also today. The first project I'd like to share with you today is Heidi 3. It's a project in Dubai Design District. It's a project of different programs. It's a mixed-use development. So this project includes cafes, artist studios, artist workshops such as carpentry, painting classes, offices, entrepreneurial spaces, as well as a large N5 incubator space, which has 3D printing machines and other CNC wood machines, etc. So it's kind of a small campus project that we were asked to put together in a period of only 9 months. The ridiculous requests that come from clients. So basically the site is, today Dubai Design District is these buildings here. It's a flourishing, thriving district in Dubai, which houses a lot of the design houses. And the site was in a water body right next to the design district. And we were asked to design and build the project within a period of 9 months, knowing that the project was still on a water body. So basically, we started immediately looking at what materials can we use, and this is also relates to our interest in sustainability and recycling, and especially when projects have a temporary nature of that sort. So Dubai is a large shipping port. It's a huge port area that connects many, many parts in the world, and containers are available easily. And so we thought, okay, maybe we can use the container to build this project. But then the question becomes, how do we use the container not to have an industrial building at the end, and how do we use it in a way where we can create a sustainable campus that is also friendly and inviting to visitors and enjoyable at the same time. We were also inspired and looked at closely the frieze, or the way Dubai was built in the past, and these cluster of communities that because it's a largely desertscape that is being built step by step by step. Today, this area looks very different, but I mean, many areas we start the project in a desert context, and by the time of completion already the project begins to become part of an urban fabric. So the idea of the frieze, or this community space with architecture and landscape, if you can see here closely that each cluster has as much architecture as much as landscape within it, if not more landscape than building mass by itself. And that was important to keep in mind in order to create this introverted campus. Hence, we built this project using 84 containers that are 40 feet long and high cube, meaning that they are 2.6 meter in height, and assembled them in a way where they are introverted to protect from the harshness of the context around it, yet provide 5 different pockets or internalized gardens that allow for activity. And this is here where I mentioned before, the diagram of relations is more important to us than the diagram of form. We also thought of and did end up doing that, using containers as vertical wind towers in order to ventilate the courtyards and the gardens, and that is typically traditional in the UAE architecture, in the vernacular architecture of the UAE. And this is a massing model study of how we started to lay out these containers in a way where landscape and architecture merge together and do not compete with each other, but work hand in hand with one another. And of course, to meet the ridiculous deadline of 9 months, the container idea was good because it allowed us to prefabricate a lot of the containers offsite and just bring them on site and quickly assemble them. And here you can see photos of this construction, and actually we did not use any steel reinforcement, minimal steel reinforcement to the containers, and use them as they are. And of course, they were insulated against the heat. And here you have final photos of how they are, and you can see also the wind towers that ventilate, because it's an introverted space. So we needed to bring in the wind down into the courtyard. So the wind towers capture the wind at the higher levels and bring them down to the courtyard level, where they start to create the beautiful wind flows. We also introduced sunken fire pits into the landscape so that it becomes also a lively space that provides visitors or people working there and living there, not living, but spending most of the day there, different opportunities to do different activities. And again, you can see here the way we introduce the windows also from almost floor to ceiling to allow the seamless connection with the landscape, so that it continually merges the inside and outside. We also introduced large seesaws, swings with very wide pedestals, and this is a collaboration with Case Design that are based in Mumbai, that allow people to sit and work on these swings. They can actually put their laptop there and a cup of coffee and work all day sitting on a swing. These are photos with the landscape further developed. Usually, we start with a project, and by the time it's finished and we take the photos, the landscape has not kicked in. So I usually go back after a few years myself and take a few photos to see how to see how the landscape has developed in the project. And this is another model photo showing this space. Another project I'd like to share with you today is Al Warqa Mosque. It's a mosque that we designed in Dubai. So jumping also from a multi-mixed-use campus to a religious facility building, showing our interest lies in diversity of programs and not strictly in one building typology, but trying to re-question buildings of different programs and different typologies. So this mosque, again, you can see the site started in a very suburban area and very much a desert scape with housing clusters starting to grow. But now it's actually a fully developed neighborhood, and you hardly see any sand or desert scape. So again, this is the first photo of me visiting the site with the client, and you can see there were no roads. So again, the project had to introvert in such harsh desert climate conditions. Sometimes things cannot open up so freely to the outside, but have to fold in on itself in order to protect itself from the harshness of the climate. Yet, I really wanted to open the mosque to the neighborhood so that it is a neighborhood mosque and not something that is iconic within the neighborhood, but rather something that is a communal function, something, which is very much like a community center. So we looked at the typical urban fabric and typologies where, buildings start to have internalized courtyards that allow for this introversion, yet a connection to the landscape at the same time. This is a more recent picture with the road infrastructure in place, and you can see the highlighted mosque area. In this project, we also wanted to challenge the typical typologies of mosques, let's say, because there are 4 types of mosques, and if you want to generalize it in a way, where the Arab hypostyle, the Persian type, the Indian 3-dome, and the Turkish central dome. So we do a lot of research into the history, the typologies before we start to re-question, but we wanted to actually return as much as possible back to the Arab hypostyle, which is the most modest type of mosques, and which is more relevant to the region itself, because Dubai and the UAE is very far from the Persian, Indian, and Turkish culture, and is mostly the Arab culture itself. But the mosques that you see being built today are usually a hybrid of these typologies, and do not adopt one single type, but mix different types together, but still they are more in an iconic format. So we proposed a mosque that is that has no boundary wall, yet the wall of the prayer hall itself and the courtyard is what protects it from the harshness of the climate or the context around it. So it is open to the community. You can walk into it from many different directions. Here you can see in plan, this is the mosque prayer area actually, and this is the courtyard area, and then this is the hypostyle, the riwaq, what they call the riwaq, wrapping around it, so it really allows people to walk freely into it from many different directions. Another interesting feature in this mosque is where we located the women prayer area. We located it within the male prayer area as a bridge suspended above, and not in the back, but rather a little bit less than half within the space of the prayer hall space. And this mosque was actually nominated and shortlisted for the Aga Khan Award. Here you can see a photo of the mosque itself and how we challenged the typical typology of arches. You know, religious buildings in the past always had the arch, but the arch worked in a very specific context, and it was because they built in vernacular materials such as stone, and they needed to have these arches to allow for larger openings. Today we use concrete, so the arch just becomes a symbolic item rather than a method of construction, because with concrete you can span very large distances without having an arch form. Yet the religious authority insisted on having the arch, as it is a key feature in defining a religious building. But we were able to challenge this and discuss with them further and introduce a parabolic arch rather than the classical semicircular or horseshoe or pointed arch type, but parabolic arch of 5 different sizes. And this conversation took several months actually for them to accept. But what this brings to the facade, I believe, is a kind of a music that allows the facade not to impose an order, but actually become playful and more inviting to the community itself. And here you can see how then the riwaq opens up straight into the courtyard space that opens up again into the main prayer hall area. So you can see the connection from the outside to the hypostyle, to the courtyard, to the interior space of the prayer. So a kind of a seamless connection, yet very well protected from the harshness of the desert and the climate itself. One interesting thing in the mosque, what I was interested in was natural light, and that is a big asset in the UAE, especially. We have so much sunlight. This is like something that is very important for the architect, I believe, to consider. So the pattern you see here actually is a 3D relief that plays with light. And we do computer simulations that show, in extreme summer, extreme winter, for example, at 3 different times in the day, how this pattern starts to read differently on the facade, meaning that the facade is not a static facade, but is constantly in conversation with the sun and is constantly in some form of change. And the pattern is an abstracted floral relief that is drawn. And here you can see more recent pictures of it being used, how they start people to meet and sit and talk in the riwaq space, because it offers this shaded area in such a strong sun condition. And this shows more clearly the connection between the courtyard space and the interior prayer space. Actually, the prayer space, when there is more, the interior capacity of prayer is 360 worshippers. So it also allows for worshippers to pray in the courtyard. So it has a maximum capacity of 500. So it can extend all the way out to the courtyard space also. And here is a more detailed study of the skylight, again, talking about light as something I am very interested in, always in designing architecture. And I believe that natural light is what molds and creates space. So, and we have a lot of it here in the UAE. Maybe if this building is in Singapore, I would think about it differently. But here you can see how we study very carefully the skylight within the haram space, being a high side light or a vertical top light, and studying these by physical model with real simulations that we can do accurately on different months and different times of the day. And this is the actual photo of the interior of the prayer space. And you can see it's fully lit by natural light. There is no artificial light in this photo. It's only natural light. And this light, again, is constantly changing with the moving of time along the day. But it is a calm, homogeneous light. And this was a very specific intent for the design of the light of this mosque. Even you see the corners are filleted. They do not meet at 90 degrees to avoid any shadow. I wanted this seamless connection in the walls, not to avoid sharp lines of shadow, and this just hue of light that represents something spiritual, I believe. And you can see above here the female prayer hall suspended as a bridge, a closer photo at that bridge. Another mosque I designed in Dubai did not get built, which also talks about light in a different way, just to show you. I won't present this project, but I want to just show you how the light itself could be thought of differently. This is the interior prayer space of this mosque, and the prayer times happens at 5 times during the day. So it shows the actual condition of natural light within the space at 5 different times in the day. So this is 1 time, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Sorry, the 5th is at night, so I did not include it. It will be artificial light. So again, showing how one space can retransform itself just by pure reflections of natural light, and how important that is in creating architecture and space. Another project I will present today is an office tower that we designed in Dubai that had no client. I just wanted to challenge the office and myself in thinking, we criticize all these towers of different forms all over the world, of different shapes, sizes, scales, but how contextual are they, and what makes a tower belong to that site or belong to that area? And we thought, okay, what should a tower in Dubai look like? And how could it be a tower just for Dubai itself and not a tower that could exist anywhere else in the world? So again, looking at light, which we thought is important because that's a very particular element to Dubai and the GCC, the area here in general. You can see clearly that we have 73% of clear sky per year, with 22% intermediate and 5% only of overcast, versus Singapore, where you have 85% of overcast and only 0.4% of clear, while London, again, is 16% of clear only, and Sydney 33% of clear, meaning that Dubai has a very specific sky, and then that sky in some way should have a direct impact on how we create or produce architecture. These are photos I took from my office window at some point, showing 4 different days, random days, how the sky is basically almost the same. It never changes so much. So then how would that really affect architecture? And looking at the sun in a very specific way, where, in the sun angle also in Dubai in the summer is at 88 degrees, while in Tokyo is 78 and 62 in Berlin. So in Europe, it is quite not that high, while here in the GCC, it's extremely high. It's almost at 90 degrees. And then in winter, again, it is low, but it is not that low. In Berlin can reach 14 degrees, while in here it still remains at 42 degrees in that sense. So then, if we were to design a tower that had to be a glass tower, because, this is what developers want. This was, again, a challenge that we took on. Then usually how would you do that? You would have tinted glass or louvered facade that has a very high cost, not sustainable at all. So we wanted to think in a more proactive way. So maybe the tower, if the tower tilted towards the south and opens up towards the north, then that would block the sun from direct exposure. And then if we did that, then we could clearly see that a lot of its facade becomes directly shaded in that context. But the problem is that when you create such a gesture in a tower, is that how do you put in the vertical shaft, which has to carry the elevators, the staircases, etc. And the solution to that we found is that by cutting that tower into, for example, into that volume into 3 blocks and stacking them staggered would allow us to introduce still a vertical core. And that also helped us to add further shade from these one block onto the other to the facade, which also helped more with the sustainability aspect of the tower. So we end up with such a form. And again, it's not a diagram of form, but a diagram of relations. It is a specific light and sunlight study that we followed that resulted in this form. And it's not our desire to start with a form that which then later becomes, to create an architecture. And I believe that the latter is much more important and much more rich in producing architecture itself. And then here you can see at the end of the day, it's a very simple section of a building, yet it has maybe a quite complex shape to it, but in section it's quite very easy. And these are thermal studies to the facade that proved our hypothesis that this kind of massing really does help in minimizing sun exposure, especially during the working hours in a typical office building. More perspectives on the building itself, just to give you an idea, where you start to create by these tilts also these interesting intersections with the ground, as well as interesting intersections between the volumes themselves, which can become common spaces within an office block that create platforms for views and lunch and other social activity, which we also think is very important to introduce into a building type. Another project is in Saudi Arabia. It's Hay Jamil. This project is currently almost complete. It will be open, I believe, this fall soon. Again, Saudi Arabia has a very similar context to the UAE in GCC. It is also on the sea yet, and has a very similar cultural context too. Probably a bit more introverted than the UAE, in that sense also. So we looked at, again, typical typologies within Saudi Arabia and how people come to conglomerate or come together. Since this project is actually, again, a mixed-use development, it has a cinema, but mainly it's for the arts only, for the arts and culture. So it has a cinema, it has artist studios, it has art galleries in it. It has an exhibition space, temporary exhibition space, a multi-purpose room, entrepreneurial spaces, a restaurant, a cafe, comedy club, etc., etc. So it's a mini campus again, in a way. And you can see here the typical markets in Saudi Arabia where people really love to gather, to come together. It's really a stereotype that it is a closed culture, but people are always very excited to come together in big groups and talk and enjoy socializing in that sense. And the site was actually in a rather residential neighborhood. On one side, we had a lot of houses, which is on this side of the street, and on the other side, again, is still a empty land. So again, opening up to this kind of desertscape was something that we thought is not good because of the harshness of the climate, but rather, again, introverting in a way, but introverting yet keeping a very a strong essence of the landscape within the project. So then we thought, okay, the idea would be maybe one big courtyard, yet the courtyard is not only limited to the ground floor, but also goes up on the other 2 levels. This project is basement with ground plus 2. Due to the sheer scale, it's a 17,000 square meter built up area project. Here you can see the site in context. So you can see here to the south is a very residential neighborhood. To the east, again, is a complex of villas and residences. And then to the north here is actually, this is the US consulate. So it's, again, also more a diplomatic quarter. So in a way, it made sense not to open up so much to the exterior, and it was a request from the municipality also to not expose to the outside the building. So then we designed the building in a big U shape with 1 block in the middle, which the U actually services all the facilities that are mostly public, and the one in the middle is actually the temporary exhibition spaces. So these are curated exhibitions that change every couple of months, and that's it. And as well as offices, and these are for the owner of the whole facility. Here you can see in the rendering how the ground floor connects to the first floor, connects to the second floor, and the terrace is not seen as something that's only on a ground level, but connects up to all the different levels, and access is always from the courtyard itself. The building is also staggered from all around, again, taking advantage of the natural light to bring not as much possible natural light into the spaces. So the spaces are really fully lit by natural light from the surrounding. Here you can see the exterior facade of the building, and the idea is it is not a blank facade, but actually it is a blank canvas, which allows for art projections onto the facade, or a dynamic facade that constantly can change and interact differently with the city depending on the different activities happening within the building itself. These are more recent built pictures of the project, showing how it terraces up and all the stairs connect you from the courtyard, forcing people to meet in the morning, going to their spaces, kind of, putting them on the spot to have a conversation with one another. And again, here you can see all the natural light in all the spaces along the periphery wall. And the facade is made from pearlescent white aluminum flex gold. So it's a pearl color. A pearl is a big thing in the GCC. So again, this facade can only be achieved, I believe, this reflections in the GCC. If we made this facade in Singapore, it wouldn't work because of the overcast. You don't have the sun for this facade to really talk with the sun. So this facade is somehow always in conversation with the sun. And this is a section of the building, and again, a diagram of relations. So basically thinking, I believe that a successful project is a project that we can draw in very thick line also, and still has a very strong concept that clearly shows with very few lines in it, yet can unfold to have many different layers. That's my practice, and I'll jump now a little bit into the National Pavilion of the UAE and the research around the works for the National Pavilion of the UAE. And basically, the theme of the Biennale in Venice was how will we live together? And that question was set by Hashim Sarkis, who is the chief curator of the Biennale. And for us, actually, it was about how do we live together as human beings and planet Earth. So we saw it as a relation between us humans and Earth, and related it, of course, to the emergency crisis around climate change and something that we really need to address immediately. I believe this is actually the first photo of planet Earth as a whole that was taken. It was only taken in 1967, not very far, not a very long time ago, where the first time we really had a full photo of planet Earth. And I think this is a point where we came to a realization that our planet is finite. So it really has boundaries. It has a mass that can finish at some point and does not extend beyond. It is not the universe itself. Today, we are a population of 7.9 billion, and we are projected to grow from today to 2050 by an additional 2.1 billion. And climate change is real. I mean, from 1930 to 2012, just watching one glacier, we can see how, temperature is increasing, and it's mostly related to CO2. Then, how did that by 2050 we will consume 60 trillion tons of cement? I mean, cement is responsible for 8% of global CO2 emission. And actually, the worse than that is that to produce 1 ton of cement, we produce 1 ton of CO2. So it has a relationship of 1 to 1, which is actually no other material on the planet has such a relationship of 1 to 1. It is that kind of catastrophic in a sense, and has a huge responsibility to play towards climate change. So imagine if today at a population of 7.9, we consume 8%, and we are growing to 10.1 billion, and then cement itself will become 16% of global CO2. It's impossible. I don't believe it is something that is possible to continue to grow and build with such a material that has such a catastrophic climate impact. Another issue to address is extraction and how much we consume from the planet. The construction industry, we consume 40%, as well as how much energy do we consume. We consume also, I believe, 40% of global energy, which 86% of which comes from fossil fuels, as well as waste. So waste varies actually in each country from 35 to 55% of, let's say, global waste comes from the construction industry, actually. So if I'm just to put it in layman terms, just, as an architect, this is also a study done by Dr. Philip Block at the ETH. It shows that it is, all these are responsible for 40%. So we ask ourselves the question, what is our responsibility as 21st century architects today? And, the modern architect, what was his responsibility in the 20th century? How did they look at that? And was it part of their agenda to address climate change, to address construction materiality at that scale? I think this is a great photo I love to show of all these great architects that we admire and look up to. I've also had the privilege to work with a few of them myself. But what I find very strange in this photo is actually the suit that they all wear is exactly almost the same. While you have people from so many different cultural backgrounds in this photo, yet they all look very similar in what they wear. So in a way, talking about how modern architecture looks at culture and identity by itself, and how globalization or standardization start to play a bigger picture in construction industry and architecture specifically, versus how it was in the vernacular times, and specifically, for example, looking at the book of Bernard Rudowski, Architecture Without Architects, and how architecture was produced by culture itself and by communities themselves. So in order to solve the problem of cement, this was something that we wanted to challenge ourselves with in the research. So in order to solve the problem of cement, it's a geological problem that we have to solve, because actually the CO2 emission that is made is actually from the conversion of limestone to lime that emits CO2. So CaCO3 is converted to CaO, and then there is a release of a CO2 molecule in that chemical reaction. So I started looking at the landscape to find an alternative mineral that could replace lime, CaO, as a binder within the cement mix that did not have these problems of CO2 emission. So what I was captivated and interested, that what really caught my attention were the salt flats, or in Arabic they're called sabkhas, and it's an Arabic word actually found in the English dictionary, meaning salt flat. And these salt flats actually constitute 5% of the UAE geography. And then with further research, what interested me is this crystal crust. They have these crystal layers that produce cementitious slabs, amazing cementitious slabs that are really very strong. I thought, okay, what is the binder that is working in this cementitious slab? There should be a glue that is working in this slab. Maybe that glue could offer us the answer and the solution in that. And looking at that closer, we found that vernacular architecture, not in the UAE, but other towns with similar environments and geographies, were built using these salt blocks that you see being extracted from earth. And for example, this is Siwa. This is on the border of Egypt and Libya. It's 900-year-old town that is built from the salt flats, from their salt blocks. And another interesting example is actually Shat al-Jird in Tunisia, and this is a photo from Star Wars, and the architecture in Star Wars actually is built from salt flats. Many hundreds of years ago, these buildings were built using salt flats. So there is a binder in this material that we found, we thought if we could find that would be very interesting. And at the same time, sabkhas are natural environments that absorb CO2, so we looked deeper and we found that actually there is a mineral that is magnesium oxide, MgO, and that is actually the binder within the block itself that is gluing the material itself. So then we thought, if we could use MgO instead of lime, that would be excellent. But at the same time, we could not promote the extraction of sabkhas or use of sabkhas to build with, because I believe, it's a fact, we don't have enough sabkhas to extract and eat in order to build with. And again, these sabkhas consume CO2 and they are precious. So we have to really, in that sense, preserve them. These are photos of different sabkhas in the UAE, and they actually fall under the category of wetland in the Ramsar Convention, and there are 10 wetlands in the UAE that fall under that category. So if we could not source them from the MgO from the sabkhas, through research with the New York University of Abu Dhabi, we figured that, there is another massive industrial waste material that is being dumped in the Arabian Gulf, which is the reject brine of desalination water. And that could probably offer us the solution to extract the MgO from that, because MgO again is found in sabkhas through the sea, because these sabkhas are made from the evaporation of underground water due to high heat and these desert conditions. And the GCC as a whole is responsible for 48% of global desalination, meaning that there's a huge abundance of this material available. There's the equivalent of 5,600 Olympic-sized pools daily that are being actually dumped into the sea, causing a climate catastrophe. So then from that, we were able to extract the MgO. The thinking or rationale behind it is that, again, vernacular is architecture produced from materials found in nature. The modern is produced by synthetic material, produced by technology. maybe future vernacular could be produced from industrial waste that is produced by our cities, and looking at it from that point of view. So we started a long journey of experiments looking with the reject brine. And the first experiments were simply by submerging fabrics into the reject brine solution and allowing it to crystallize. So then growing crystals, but these first experiments did not offer us a solution because these are soluble structures, meaning that they absorb humidity. If it rains, they will collapse. But yet, they allowed us to start to experiment and have a feel to the materiality and the texture that is made from these experiments. So in order to create a non-soluble material or a sturdy material that is equivalent to Portland cement, we teamed up with New York University in Abu Dhabi and their advanced material building research laboratories. And we were actually able to extract specifically the MgO from the reject brine of the desalination water and use that instead of lime in the building of the prototype that we presented in Venice. And this material actually works in compression equivalent to Portland cement. We also worked with a third university, the American University of Sharjah, in experimenting with different finishes that could then come on top of this structure as a decorative layer, not only looking at architecture as a single layer. Finally, the third experiments were about what do we present in Venice as a prototype and how do we present it. And we wanted to present something that is the antithesis of modern architecture, not only thinking about modern material cement and its impacts on the climate, but also thinking cement and its impacts on producing space, and how standardization, globalization, an architect could draw a building anywhere in the world, send the drawing anywhere, it gets built, and then there's a loss of connection between the architect himself and the materials and materiality. So the vernacular architecture of the UAE was built from corals. So then we thought, okay, maybe we can do something that's an homage to the vernacular architecture of the UAE and the coral of the architecture of the UAE. So we did a collaboration with Tokyo University and two laboratories there, Sato-san Lab and Obuchi-san Lab. And then we started actually drawing corals by hand into soil molds, again, bringing the builder, the architect, the constructor, and the community together in order to build something, rather than the architect being this, this one single solo figure that instructs everyone in the making of architecture. And we started experimenting on building with these very random shapes, a very stable structure that could form. This was built in Tokyo University. And then another prototype was built in Dubai. It's in this space I am currently in Asirkal Avenue in our laboratory here. And then finally, we built it in Venice. And each time we built it, actually, it looked different. So there is no architecture drawing for this prototype. There is a manual or an instruction of how it could be drawn. And again, it is about conversations and people talking to one another in order to build it. Yet we use very high technology devices in order to scan and calculate structure live while building, so that at the end of the day, we have a structural report that proves to the Biennale that this is a stable structure. So we built a 5 by 7 meter structure with a maximum height of 2.7 meter, built from 2,400 modules, all hand-drawn. And we exhibited large format photos by Emirati artist Farah Al-Qasimi within the space also. And this is the photo from inside. Yet it is very chaotic and random, but yet has a very strong science behind it to structurally calculate the structure. We have a 3D as-built model of the structure that proves the integrity of the structure. Finally, I end with this slide, which is what we wanted, or what we really tried to do with our architecture is similar to the Mos Eisley Cantina in Star Wars, which is a place for gathering and dialogue, a place of bringing all these different people from different planets together in a bar. And this is where our interest really lies, probably, is in cross-cultural pollination and architecture not being this stagnant mono-directional element. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, it was an interesting exhibition of displays of work that you graced us with your presence today, and we thank you for that. Excuse me?
Thank you. I'm saying thank you very much.
Okay. So we pretty are close to the hour, so I think we can take a few questions or comments in the live section, and then we can forward them to you. Let me see. Here we have a few comments from the student Anna Kanan. She says, "I'm amazed at the solutions that were presented. I think as designers, we're constantly trying to find sustainable solutions to properly acclimate our projects. The use of natural light to create a homogeneous hue in the first example is very interesting and definitely opens up an infinite amount of possibilities for molding and shaping a building's facade or core volume in order to adjust the zone angles and shading of its context." I totally agree with Anna. Well, I think the works that you presented today are beautiful examples of how you interact with all these phenomena around the architecture, which is constantly thought of as, you know, like isolated pieces of design that we kind of ignore the fact that they are going to be presented in a specific site with specific climate conditions, and the way that you not only analyze that, but use it as an advantage to the design process. I think it was very exquisite. And the fact that it's overlapped with all your knowledge of the culture and the heritage of the, you know, of the context that is in place, I think it's what really makes them unique and enriched, I would say. We also have a question here from Raquel Gomez. She asked if there has been an alternative for GCC that has been considered, or is this the only option that you have considered so far as proposal?
But sorry, I didn't get the question clearly. Alternative in what? For the prototype design?
Yeah. For the specific material, for the you were talking about the GCC and then these components. If there are other options that you have considered so far.
Actually, this this research is specifically towards finding like a vernacular material that could really work in the GCC, because the GCC does not have trees, so we don't have trees. While vernacular architecture could be seen as a sustainable method, which I believe is not sustainable on the long run. It might work now, but once we reach 10.1 billion and 12 billion and 15 billion populations, looking at vernacular architecture will no longer work. And trees need water to grow. We have water problems there. So I think we should look probably at industrial waste or waste that we produce that could recycle to produce architecture on a much bigger scale, industrial waste. And here desalination, I think, offered us a huge opportunity in this. We did look for alternatives, but unfortunately the context here is about salt and these minerals in the ground. So once you come out here and you walk you really walk the land, because I go walking, walking, and you feel that this is it. I mean, at the end, there's not much diversity in this scape here other than desert dunes and these salt flats, and the answer did lie in these salt flats.
Perfect, thank you. ¿Tenemos alguna otra pregunta, algún otro comentario? Isabel Vargas made the remark that the connections between the exterior and the interior and from one level to another in the pieces that you presented, they were very interested. So that's a remark she's adding up. I don't think we have more comments or questions, but while I would really appreciate if you could show us the slide with your Instagram handle and your username so that everyone can, make sure to follow you and get more information about your work.
Yeah, sure. Here.
We also have another question here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Marovis Payano says, wonderful projects. What is your favorite project to work on since they are also innovative in their sustainable strategies?
It's a great question for an architect. I mean, each project, I enjoy different parameters within the project, but in general, as an architect, after the completion of a project, you always feel, oh, can I do it again? You have that feeling, I could have done better maybe, because you're constantly learning and developing yourself. So there's, each project, there is something inside me that says, oh, I wish I could just go and do it in another way. I would definitely have done it differently. But of course, I think it's about the journey in each project, and it's about these key parameters that you select to really tackle in each project, and that's what gives the enjoyment of the project. And I wouldn't say there's one particular project that really that stands out for me, that I feel, oh, this is like something I've created and stands by far better than the rest. On the contrary, I always see the problems more than I see the benefits. And this is probably my critical thinking, always to force myself to criticize myself, to develop myself further. And this is the only way we can learn and grow. And it's through this critical thinking and harsh criticism towards ourselves. Once you ask yourselves the difficult questions and you force yourselves to answer them, then, others become irrelevant. And you don't work for others. You should work for yourself. And you should be the biggest judge on yourself, kind of situation. I hope that makes sense.
One of my friends says we are obsessive about that. I think we're going to have our last question here is from Heide Garcia. She says, as an architect, what is your favorite part of the design process?
I mean, I enjoy lots of different parts of the project. I really enjoy in the beginning visiting the site. I really enjoy, trying to understand what, the context, what is the geography of this site, who are the people around us, what's the culture in this context, what is the climate in this context. I really enjoy that, and having conversations with the community and with the people, and that plays a huge part in that. And then again, of course, the first concept design stage, I enjoy a lot, working closely with the team and challenging ourselves. I mean, today, every project, we have at least 15 options before we decide on what gets built. And I didn't present that back of house kind of situation, but there's so many solutions, and then which one do you select? And that process I really enjoy, because again, it's all about these dialogues and conversations and trying to find what is good, what is bad. And then during construction, it's the most stressful part, but I mean, I enjoy talking to the contractors, the labor on site, even sitting, having lunch with them, and trying to talk about details and how to build things. And each one has a different phase and really a different relationship between me and the project.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, I think this will be all for today. We really are honored with your virtual presence today. We appreciate the fact that you took time to be with us and share your beautiful body of work with us. It was truly an inspiration. So, gracias a todos por unirse este día de hoy a esta charla. Esperamos que haya sido de su provecho. Recuerden que va a estar disponible una vez finalice, grabada y colgada en el canal de Univer Línea por YouTube. Seguimos en contacto. Cualquier cosa que quieran seguir investigando, ahí tienen la información del arquitecto Wael Alawar y pueden seguir investigando más sobre su trabajo en la práctica arquitectónica. Nos vemos en una próxima ocasión. Gracias a todos por unirse en el día de hoy. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye bye.